Why did Canadian citizen Craig Robertson embrace Islam? And what is the secret behind this remarkable transformation? Robertson himself recounts the story of this conversion, stating, "I am Craig Robertson. I hail from Vancouver, Canada, where I was raised within a Roman Catholic family until I was 12 years old. For the past 6 years, I have proudly been a Muslim, and I would love to share my journey to Islam with you. Every story should start at the beginning. As a child, I attended a Catholic school where religion was not just a subject, but my strongest one. I excelled at learning church teachings. My parents made me an altar boy at a very young age, which made my grandparents incredibly proud. However, the more I learned, the more questions I had. I still vividly remember asking my mother during Mass, "Is our religion the right one?" Her reply echoes in my mind to this day, "Craig, they are all the same. They are all good." That never sat right with me. What was the point of dedicating myself to one faith if they were all exactly the same? When I was 12, my maternal grandmother passed away after a painful battle with colon cancer. I did not realize the profound impact of her death until much later in life. In my grief and confusion, I decided to become an atheist as a way to punish God. I was an angry child, furious with the world, myself, and the Creator. This anger followed me into my early teens at a public high school, where I desperately tried to fit in after years in a sheltered religious environment. Lacking social experience, I relied on my peers to teach me how to navigate this new world, quickly adopting toxic habits like swearing and mocking others. Despite my efforts to belong, I remained an outsider, facing constant bullying and rejection from my peers. Devastated, I eventually withdrew completely into an emotional shell. My teens were a dark time, marked by deep isolation and unhappiness. Although my parents genuinely tried to reach out, I constantly pushed them away with my rude and hostile attitude. When I finally finished high school in the summer of 1996, I figured things had hit rock bottom and could only improve from there. To turn my life around, I enrolled in a local technical college, hoping a good career would bring me financial stability and happiness. I also started working at a nearby fast food chain to cover my tuition. Just a couple of weeks before the school term began, I received an invitation to move in with some of my coworkers. To me, it felt like the perfect solution to all my problems. I envisioned leaving my family behind and hanging out with my friends 24/7. One evening, I confidently announced my departure to my parents. They immediately shut it down, telling me I wasn't ready, and flatly refused to let me go. Being a stubborn 17-year-old, I lashed out. I swore at them and said terrible things that I still deeply regret today. Intoxicated by this sudden taste of independence, I felt liberated and eager to do whatever I wanted. I packed my bags, moved out, and didn't speak to my parents for a long time afterward. I was balancing the responsibilities of a job and my education when my roommates introduced me to marijuana. From the very first time I tried it, I felt a strong connection to the experience. Initially, I used it in small amounts after work as a way to relax. However, my usage rapidly increased. It reached a point during one particular weekend where I lost track of time entirely. Suddenly it was Monday morning, and I was supposed to be in class. I rationalized skipping just one day, thinking my absence wouldn't be noticed, but that day turned into a permanent departure from my studies. I eventually found myself prioritizing that lifestyle over my goals, focusing on immediate gratification and substance use, while convincing myself that I no longer required an education. On the surface, my life seemed fantastic, or at least, that is what I desperately wanted to believe. I had accidentally cultivated this bad boy persona at my job, which suddenly made me a magnet for female attention I had never experienced back in high school. Fueled by this new status, I began experimenting with harder drugs. Looking back, it was only by the grace of God, alhamdulillah, that I was protected from the absolute worst of addiction. Yet, a dark reality set in. The moment the substances wore off, an overwhelming misery took over. I was trapped in a hollow existence, feeling entirely worthless. To sustain that constant chemical numbness, I resorted to stealing from my workplace and betraying my friends. Soon, paranoia consumed me. I constantly looked over my shoulder, convinced the police were tracking my every move. As my mind began to fracture under the pressure, I knew I was reaching a breaking point. Desperate for a way out, I realized my only true hope for healing lay in rediscovering my faith. My interest was first piqued by a film about witchcraft that seemed to mirror my own curiosities. This led me to explore literature on Wicca and nature-based belief systems. As I studied these traditions, I noted their references to the use of natural substances, which became a part of my exploration at the time. I vividly recall the unconventional discussions I would have with others during those periods. When asked about my faith, I was clear. I did not subscribe to a monotheistic view of God, but instead believed in a pantheon of deities who were as complex and imperfect as myself. Throughout that turbulent period, one constant presence remained: a loyal friend who refused to abandon me. He was a devout, born-again Christian who missed no opportunity to share his faith with me. In return, I relentlessly mocked his beliefs whenever I could. Yet, He was the only person in my life who offered genuine connection without judgment. Driven by that unique bond, I accepted his invitation to a youth weekend camp. I had absolutely no spiritual expectations. In fact, I secretly looked forward to a weekend of pure entertainment, planning to make fun of the Bible thumpers. Everything changed on the second evening during a massive worship service in the main auditorium. As the band played powerful praise music, I looked around the room. People of all ages, young and old, men and women, were weeping openly, crying out for forgiveness, and pouring their hearts out to God. The raw sincerity of the moment completely disarmed me. Deeply moved, I found myself whispering a silent prayer. God, I know I have been a terrible person. Please help me, forgive me, and give me a fresh start. Instantly, an overwhelming wave of emotion washed over me, and tears began streaming down my face. Right then and there, I made the conscious decision to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. In an explosion of pure joy, I threw my hands into the air and began to dance. The surrounding crowd stared at me in absolute shock. The very skeptic who had ridiculed their faith and called them foolish for believing in God was now dancing and praising Him at the top of his lungs. Upon returning to the house where I used to party, I made a firm decision to completely abstain from all drugs, intoxicants, and romantic distractions. Driven by my new faith, I immediately confronted my friends, urgently explaining that they needed to accept Christianity to be saved. To my absolute surprise, they rejected my message, which deeply shocked me since they had always respected my opinion in the past. Consequently, I decided to move back into my parents' home after a long period of estrangement. Once there, I continuously pressured them with arguments on why they needed to become Christians. As Catholics, they firmly believed they were already Christians, but I strongly disagreed, viewing their veneration of saints as a contradiction to true faith. Eventually, I decided to move out once more, though this time we parted on much better terms. Recognizing my efforts to change, my grandfather offered me a job to support my ongoing recovery. Seeking a refuge from domestic stress, I began frequenting a Christian youth center, a safe haven designed for teenagers to escape family pressures and explore their faith. Since I was older than the majority of the boys there, I naturally stepped into a leadership role, driving the conversations and ensuring the younger kids felt included. Yet, a deep sense of hypocrisy haunted me. I had secretly returned to drinking and dating. By day, I preached messages of Jesus' unconditional love to the youth. By night, I turned to alcohol. Throughout this turbulent period, my sole Christian friend remained a constant anchor, consistently offering guidance and trying to steer me back onto the right path. I still vividly recall my initial interaction with a Muslim, an event that left a lasting impression on me. During a gathering at the youth center, one of our peers introduced a guest. He was a young Muslim boy whose name I no longer recall. However, I distinctly remember the host saying, "I brought my friend along. He is a Muslim, and I want to guide him toward Christianity." I was utterly captivated by this 14-year-old's demeanor. Despite his youth, he displayed remarkable serenity and warmth. Incredibly, he stood his ground, defending his character and Islam against a dozen Christians who were launching verbal attacks against him and his faith. As we sat there in an increasingly agitated state, aimlessly searching our Bibles for counter-arguments, he simply smiled. Quietly, he spoke to us about the concept of monotheism and the presence of love within Islam. He resembled a gazelle surrounded by a pack of a dozen hyenas, yet he maintained his polite, tranquil, and friendly attitude the entire time. It was an astonishing revelation for me. A copy of the Quran remained on the shelf, left behind by a Muslim youth. Whether by accident or design, I remained uncertain. Driven by curiosity, I began turning its pages, only to be met with an immediate, defensive anger. The book infuriated me precisely because its arguments felt more coherent than those of the Bible. Overwhelmed, I slammed it down onto the couch and walked away, my thoughts a turbulent mix of rage and confusion. Yet, the reading had done its work, leaving a stubborn, quiet doubt lingering at my core. In the days that followed, I actively tried to forget the incident, focusing instead on my friends at the youth house. Our weekends were defined by devotion. Instead of spending Saturday nights at bars, our youth group traveled to different churches for massive worship events. It was at one of these gatherings, known as the Well, that I experienced a profound proximity to God. Yearning to humble myself entirely and manifest my love for the Creator, I moved instinctively into a full prostration. I was completely ignorant of the fact that I was mimicking the daily prayer posture of Muslims. All I knew in that sacred moment was that it felt undeniably correct, truer than any ritual I had ever known. I felt a surge of genuine spirituality, but true to form, that fleeting sense of divine connection soon began to fade. For years, our pastor rigorously instilled in us the absolute necessity of surrendering our own desires and submitting our will to God's. It was a spiritual goal I desperately longed to achieve, yet I struggled endlessly to grasp how to actually make it happen. I would fervently pray, pleading, "Lord, override my will with yours and guide my path," but those prayers were consistently met with silence. I felt my spirit slowly detaching from the church, my faith quietly slipping away. This spiritual void was soon compounded by unfathomable tragedy. My girlfriend of 2 years was brutally assaulted by the very man who had introduced me to Christianity, alongside another close friend. I was in the adjacent room, too intoxicated to comprehend what was unfolding or to intervene. If that betrayal wasn't devastating enough, only a couple of weeks later, the director of our local youth house was exposed for molesting a young boy who was a close friend of mine. In an instant, my world shattered into pieces. The sting of betrayal was sharp, made worse because it came from my inner circle, people who outwardly pursued divine closeness and eternal reward. Left with absolutely nothing, a familiar emptiness took over. I became a ghost in my own life, wandering blindly without purpose, hiding my pain behind a cycle of endless work, sleep, and reckless distractions. To add to the ruin, my girlfriend and I parted ways soon after. My entire existence was swallowed by a storm of rage, guilt, and grief. I found myself trapped between screaming at the heavens, asking how my Creator could let me fall this low, and hating myself for being so terribly self-absorbed. Shortly after those events, my supervisor at work informed our team that a devout Muslim would be joining us. The manager emphasized his strong religious convictions and advised us to maintain a respectful and decent demeanor around him. From the moment he arrived, however, he actively began engaging in da'wah. He lost no time in preaching and sharing the tenets of Islam with everyone. While my colleagues immediately shut him down and expressed total disinterest, I was the sole exception. Deep down, my soul was yearning for answers, and not even my own stubborn nature could silence that inner cry. As we began working side by side, we frequently debated our respective beliefs. Although I had completely abandoned Christianity by that point, his probing questions unexpectedly reignited my dormant faith. Suddenly, a fierce surge of conviction washed over me, and I felt like a medieval crusader defending the holy faith against what I then perceived as an evil Muslim adversary. Contrary to everything I had been led to believe, this particular Muslim man possessed no malice. In truth, his character surpassed my own. He abstained from foul language, maintained an unwavering composure, and consistently extended kindness and respect to others. Deeply moved by his demeanor, I concluded that he possessed the ideal qualities to become an exemplary Christian. This sparked a mutual exchange where we questioned each other about our respective faiths. However, as our discussions progressed, I found myself growing increasingly defensive. My frustration culminated in a moment of intense anger when I realized that, despite my efforts to prove the veracity of Christianity, it felt as though he was the one walking in the truth. Plunged into deep confusion and desperate to reinforce my wavering convictions, I rushed to my vehicle and sped toward the well. I was certain that praying at that sanctuary would restore my spiritual fervor and grant me the conviction needed to convert him. Yet, upon my frantic arrival, I discovered the venue was entirely locked and deserted. My desperate search for an alternative spiritual gathering yielded nothing, leaving me to return home utterly defeated. I began to feel an undeniable pull guiding my steps, as if an invisible force was directing my path. In response, I fell into constant prayer, begging my Creator to help me surrender my own desires to His divine will. Soon, a sense of reassurance washed over me, signaling that my pleas were heard. Back home, as I lay in bed, an overwhelming urge gripped me. I knew I had to pray with an intensity one had never felt before. Sitting up, tears streaming down my face, I cried out, "Jesus, God, Buddha, whoever you are, please guide me. I need you. My life has been filled with wrongdoing, and I cannot fix this alone. If Christianity is the true path, grant me the strength to follow it. But if Islam is the truth, please lead me directly to it." The moment I stopped speaking, my tears dried up instantly. A profound, unshakable serenity settled deep within my soul. I suddenly had absolute clarity about the answer. The following morning at work, I approached my Muslim colleague and asked, "How do I greet you properly?" Confused, he asked what I meant. I looked at him and said, "I want to become a Muslim." His face lit up as he exclaimed, "Allahu Akbar." We shared a long, emotional embrace that lasted for a full minute. I thanked him from the bottom of my heart, and right then, my journey into Islam truly began. When I reflect on the trajectory of my life and the events that shaped me, I recognize a profound divine design. I was being prepared all along to embrace Islam. God showered me with immense mercy throughout this journey. Looking back, every single experience carried a valuable lesson. I came to deeply appreciate the wisdom and beauty behind Islamic principles, such as the prohibition of intoxicants and unlawful relationships, and the true purpose of the hijab. Today, I have finally found my emotional and spiritual balance. I am no longer pulling myself in extreme directions. Instead, I am living a centered, moderate life, striving every day to be a good and sincere Muslim. Life is never without its challenges, a reality that I am sure many of you know all too well, just as I do. But these hardships and emotional pains are not in vain. They shape us into stronger individuals, teach us invaluable lessons, and guide us back to God. To have found and accepted Islam at some point in our journey is an immense blessing and an incredible privilege. We have been given a beautiful opportunity to seek the ultimate mercy, a mercy we don't naturally deserve, but one that we hope to be granted on the day of judgment, God willing. Lately, I have been able to heal my relationship with my family, and I am now hoping to begin a family of my own soon. Islam truly encompasses every aspect of our existence. Even when we are treated poorly by people around us, Muslim or not, we must always practice patience and remember to seek comfort only in God. I changed my name to Abdullah Al-Kanardi after converting to Islam. Whatever mistakes I may have made are strictly from myself and my own shortcomings. Every correct word, insight, or truth I have shared comes entirely from God's absolute perfection and favor. All praise is due to God alone. I pray that God sends His highest honors, mercy, and blessings upon His beloved and noble Prophet Muhammad. May God increase our conviction, shape our lives according to what pleases Him, and honor us all with His highest paradise.